Yo, partnership alert, partnership alert, partnership alert. Living Corporate has a partnership with LinkedIn Learning, an American massive open online course provider that provides video courses taught by industry experts across a wide array of subjects. Now, the partnership is because Living Corporate has courses on LinkedIn Learning focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion for leaders, career professionals, and anyone really looking to upskill themselves and be better allies. So make sure you check out our courses on LinkedIn Learning by clicking the link in the show notes. And let's just say you don't want to do that. When you go to LinkedIn Learning on LinkedIn, search Living Corporate. We'll be right there. All right. Peace.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the break room. It is so good to have you on to our awesome podcast. I am Dr. Brian Dixon. I am a child and adolescent psychiatrist and adult psychiatrist down in Texas. And I get to work with families and individuals to help them live their best lives, sometimes through medicine. So, it's all good. So I am here with my awesome co-host for season 2, Dr. Jide. Go forward.
Hey, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. I'm Dr. Jide Bamishigbin. I'm an assistant professor of psychology at California State University, Long Beach. I am also a health psychologist, and I study stress and health, particularly among Black fathers. And I'm also married to my beautiful wife, and I have 2 beautiful sons. Over to you, Dr. Nikki.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Nikki. I clearly aspire to be a singer, but I am not because I realize I have to sing every time. I am technically paid and trained as a licensed psychologist. I have a business down here that I have a business down here called Dr. Nikki Knows, where I see clients individually, and I work with Black women around relational and sexual health and well-being. And then I also do racial equity consultation and training with small to mid-sized organizations and businesses.
Great.
Excellent. So we are super glad that y'all are back. So always remember the break room is all about the Black experience at work, the Black mental health experience at work. And today we're going to be talking about that experience in the Ivory. So the ivory towers of medicine and business and law and everywhere in between. And so per usual, we always start off with our tea and then we go into some teaching and some topics and then we'll finish with that last nerve. And so who has the tea for today?
That'll be me.
Yay!
Yeah, so the tea for today, okay? So last night were the Emmys, okay, which is the Academy Awards for television. There's the Oscars for acting or for movies, Emmys for television. And all of the acting awards, okay? So Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor in dramas and comedies went to white people. Every single one, okay?
Wow.
Mind you, Bridgerton guy was nominated.
Oh, yeah.
Bridgerton guy didn't even get it. He a light-skinned
was
Black.
nominated.
Lovecraft Country
was nominated, which we'll talk about another day, but we're not going to get into that today, right?
That's right.
And almost all the big awards went to The Crown, which I've never seen an episode, but The Crown, and white people love The Crown.
It's not bad, but yeah, it's not Lovecraft Country.
And Ted Lasso, and I'll be honest, I have enjoyed Ted Lasso, like personally, but
Isn't it brand new though? Ted Lasso?
They're on season 2 now, though. They're on season 2 now. But regardless, it's unacceptable for all these awards to go to white people. When we know that so many Black people Black people and other people of color, Latino people, Asian people had great performances this year, and this just happens over and over and over and over. Like, part of me just wants to disinvest, but I didn't watch it. Honestly, I don't watch these things because I'm not surprised by this anymore because this happens every single year at the Grammys, at the Oscars, at the Emmys. We talk about
now
this
we'll sweep up
year.
at the Grammys. Now we might not get album of the year or record of the year,
but we only sweep up in our categories though. That's the thing.
This is true. No, that is absolutely true.
Like Kendrick
and the other
Lamar.
thing I was gonna say is usually if you don't have a campaign of Oscars so white, Emmy so white, then right, like when there's like the Twitter, like the social media exposure and focus, then you'll get like a Black person to win. But it seems like if we not really there, like we looking at you, eyes of the pressure is on, then they sort of go back to their old tactics.
Yeah, it just seems to be real lazy. So like I know Dr. Jide did not really care for Lovecraft Country, but here's one thing about that show is Lord have mercy, they worked their ass off. Like the emotion and the connection that you had to have as an actor and or actress to do shit that literally in the past resulted in people's death. I mean, that's big stuff, right?
Yeah.
And these actors, they were great. Now, I think I saw some of the performances of some of the other white folks who won, and I'm like, yeah, that was great, but it's not uncommon, right? You're playing a aristocrat, you're playing Halston, this design person. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's been done, been there, done that. Let's see them play people who were killed and drugged behind cars, right?
Okay.
That would be Oscar worthy or Emmy worthy or whatever this is. So yeah, that hurts. That really hurts.
But isn't that like just privilege played out all over again, right? Like even for us, even when we're telling our stories, let me say it this way. I've been seeing the billboards and the ads for the Wonder Years. It's been remade with an all-black family.
I
can't
that.
Wait. White folks gonna be in it. If it makes it past 6 episodes on air, I will be really surprised and impressed. Because we don't rarely get the luxury to just tell stories about the human experience for folks that happen to live in Black bodies. It is very often attached to some historical trauma, some current socio-political context, or a comedy, right? We don't get to just tell our human stories. And so for me, that is another way that white privilege plays out, that you could just be a regular. Isn't Ted Lasso like some just regular office guy? Like, I don't know what it's about at all. I think it's completely wrong. But he's just like a regular old white dude. Now, he might be funny.
It's more complicated than that, but, actually, you're like 100% wrong. Like, he's a soccer coach. He's a football coach. He's in England as a soccer coach now. That's the premise of the show. But
he's still a regular white dude.
Your point still stands. Your point stands. Your point stands.
Well, I mean, because I haven't heard any feedback about Cinderella, right? They remade that with Billy Porter being wah wah, and then so taking those traditional white roles and trying to do something different. But apparently that was an epic fail, so we will never mention that again on this podcast.
No, and it's a fail. It's a fail when my 9-year-old, who is all about fashion and glitz and glamour, and knew it was Camila Cabello and knew Billy Porter was going to be in it and was all about it. And she was like, midway through, she was like, meh, she said, this is kind of meh, right? And I was like, yeah,
wow. At 9? At 9?
Oh, baby, we don't play in this house.
Man.
So we still, again, white supremacist thought and culture reign supreme.
And this is why... Sorry, Dr. Brian. To me, a BET award matters much more.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It's our own people doing it who value our culture. Because all this, disinvest from it. Forget the Oscars. Forget the Emmys. Forget the Grammys. They don't respect us. They don't value us. Stop submitting. There would be no music. There would be no television. There would be no art without us.
None of it.
Yeah. And if you're not going to try, why should we keep trying? Because again, I mean, they know that we're still in the midst of a racial and equity reckoning, right? That hasn't changed. And for them to do some shit like that, I mean, Lord.
Now, we're going to move on to our topic, but I do want to make a point.
Please.
I don't know that I don't know if they are still in the middle of it.
Oh,
right?
Good point.
I think a big part of the return to work culture has been a return to quote unquote normalcy, has been a return to quote unquote, let's just pretend that white supremacy isn't killing Black bodies in the streets anymore and that Black people aren't differentially politically disenfranchised, because that makes us uncomfortable. And we already did that in 2020. Like, I don't hear the same level of commitment, conversation. I don't know where all these corporate dollars went to when they were saying Black Lives Matter. I don't know if their statements are still up on their websites, like all of these things. So,
did you hear that study that came out that said, all those companies that pledged all that money, they never actually donated the money?
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah. Which is a great segue into Black in the Ivory. And so one of the great things about being who we are is that we all had to go through academia, right? So you go through undergrad, you go through grad school. That's what we're here to talk about. Yeah. So, and getting a good feel for that. And so, I'm in medicine. The two of y'all went through grad school. We have listeners who are in law, other listeners who have gone through business school and gotten their MBAs. And so this is the opportunity to really kind of delve deep into what it's like to be Black, and those, at different, development points in your experience. And so I'll let Dr. Nikki kind of lead us off, and then I'll just throw out some random ass comments as we go.
I love it. So actually what I think is funny, so we were talking last week and we were like, okay, in the racial Olympics, which environment is the most oppressive? And we kind of decided like grad school is at the bottom, so a PhD program, and then we thought like maybe law school and medical school tied for second, and then B schools, business schools, the most, like the most elitist, racially fragile, non sort of social justice oriented. Like you can't even talk about these ideas in business school. You talk about them a little bit in medical school. Like, don't you get like one class about health disparities?
Literally like one. Mm-hmm.
Like one class. And then in law school, maybe you do some civil rights stuff and maybe some immigration law, and we're going to sprinkle a little bit of equity on top of that. And then in grad school, depending on your particular,
you may get a lot of it.
Focus, you might get a lot more of it.
Like CRT kind of stuff?
Yeah, you might get full on CRT.
Okay.
And you might get some of that in law school. You can so I'll speak about what I know best, which is the field of psychology, right? And so particularly in counseling psychology, clinical psychology, school psychology, which are the three applied disciplines that you're going to definitely have to talk about the impact of culture and race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, etc. Right? Mm-hmm. So, and at least take one class. Some programs have sort of developed niche or more emphasis in areas, so you might get more of that. But there is sort of a baseline expectation. But you could also go through physics and get a PhD in chemistry or biomechanics and never talk about any of these things at all, right? So, and those also tend to be. And then what I don't know if there's data on this. We probably could pull it. That the more opportunity there is to talk about these sort of social determinants or social cultural factors, the more likely you're going to see representation of people of color within the programs and within the faculty than you might or probably will be in sort of the quote unquote traditional hard sciences or external to where there's not that emphasis, right? So you're probably going to be a literal minority as a racial, ethnic, visible minority person. And so yeah, what that means is, it means so many things. And so I want to acknowledge, I think I've said this on here before, but if you're just new to this, I am a recovering academic and I always describe myself as such. So I took the route of undergraduate straight to graduate school, straight to visiting assistant professorship, to tenure track, to tenured, right? I was like in school my whole life in one area or the other up until about 3 years ago. And what I can tell you is universities are institutions, and they are part of the system, just like every other part of our collective society. So,
no matter how they try to convince you otherwise.
No matter how they try to convince you otherwise. And so that means that for Black folks in those spaces, our experiences, whether you are a graduate student, an undergraduate student, a tenure track faculty member, a non-tenure track faculty member, an administrator, etc., your experience is going to be different. And oftentimes that different doesn't feel very good. Oftentimes that different looks like under-resourced. It looks like under-supported. It looks like second-guessed. It looks like taken for granted. It looks like a whole lot of things that don't necessarily feel or that I should say this way, in my experience, and I'd be happy to hear from you all, oftentimes feels like an additional level of training, education, professional triathlon. Like it feels like it's an additional thing that you are navigating and working through in addition to learning all of the knowledge base, the skills, the practice, the all of the things required for the graduate degree, for the professional degree. You're doing that, and typically you're doing that with great success and aplomb. Because let me guarantee you, if you're at the bottom tier, you're not gonna stay there. You're not gonna finish. You're not gonna get that MD or JD or PhD if you were not at the tippity top of your academic game, right? So you're doing all of those things and navigating white supremacist systems.
Yeah, and knowing where you are within that system is going to be so important, which we'll get to in just a second. But one of the things that jumped out at me when we were brainstorming on this particular session to bring to y'all is that universities are like organisms. They will fight you. They will repel you. It's kind of like they will find ways to protect itself, even when it doesn't make any sense. You're like, wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to be a place of communal, of learning, of community, and that is not the case. They are. I think Dr. Nikki said it really well. They are businesses, right? They are organisms that act like businesses, and so keeping those ideas in mind is super, super crucial as you think about where you are in your respective discipline, and so let's run that list.
Can I add a comment?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to point out, academia is a business and your university is a business. Okay. And if you're a staff member or a faculty member there, you're an employee there. Okay. That's it. Cause they want to make you think you're a family. We're a family. We're this,
they love that family.
They
love that family.
Whatever. At the end of the day, they pay your bills. You have a job to do there, and that's it. Don't let them convince you of anything else, because that's what makes it hard to leave these spaces. That's what makes it so hard, because they try to convince you all these people are relying on you, all this stuff. It's just a job, like any other job.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, and let me be the case in point. I'm naming names and calling out places. I worked at the University of Houston for 14 years, 6.5 of which of those I was a tenured professor. And when I announced that I was leaving, one, I had to do it. Whereas the other example that had been set was that either came from the dean or the department chair, but I had to announce to both the students and my fellow colleagues that I was leaving. And the department chair's response was about a paragraph and a half, and the paragraph was more about who was going to replace me and going to make sure that they retained the line and who would be on the search committee, more than there was any acknowledgement of my contribution to that quote unquote family for 14 years of my life. So you a job. You're a line item, and the moment your utility no longer serves that institution, then
I'll be like a bad habit,
baby.
Boom,
boom, yeah. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, because as I'm sure most of our listeners right now, hopefully until we get even bigger than we are, most of our listeners right now are probably going to fall somewhere in that staff, faculty / administrator role. But we're going to start from the babies. So as a Black student, so if a Black student is listening to the podcast, what do they do to survive being Black in the Ivory as a student, y'all?
Yeah. So one of the things that I loved about being an academic, and what actually kept me in the academy as long as it did, was mentoring of Black students, period. And I mentored students of color broadly, and of course showed up and performed well in the classroom, teaching students of all racial, ethnic backgrounds and genders and all the things. But my advisees were Black students. And I'm so it's a humble brag, but it's also sort of sad to say that at some point I developed a reputation in the institution that I would get emails from Black students across the institution that would say, I heard that you can help people figure stuff out, right? Like they would just be in a whole different program, and can I come talk to you, right? And so students, the thing that I would tell my students all the time is, you belong here. They made an offer of admission to you because you are skilled, you are knowledgeable, you're intelligent, and you're talented. There will be so many moments in your experience in this time that will make you question that. one, that's the nature of graduate school. It's to make you feel like you ain't shit. It's just part of how it goes. But two, because you will be having a different experience socially and culturally than your white counterparts, it can feel isolating. But you absolutely deserve to be there. And that the way to survive is to find your community, find your people. And that might be other folks in your program. It might be folks across the institution, but you must find other Black graduate students, other Black professional students, because as much as your family loves you and supports you and wants you to do well, as much as other friends love you and support you, nobody understands the professional school, grad school game like other folks that are actually in it. It's so just a whole other beast.
I want to reiterate that. Absolutely. Find your people. You know what I'm saying? Like, you absolutely need to find your community of people who are like you, who can share your experience. So finding other Black people should be your first step. If you're going to grad school in the fall, the first thing you do, where's the Black Student Association, Black Graduate Student Association, or whatever it's called? Find that. And then I want to echo Dr. Nikki's point about being a Black professor, and particularly you as a Black woman. People like gravitate towards you, like Black women on because more often than not, you're the only Black professor in your department, perhaps in your college, and the students,
those were both true for me for a very long time.
They want to find you and they want to talk to you. And even I'm not a woman, but as a Black professor in my office, I've had students just knock on my door I've never seen before while I'm trying to work, and they're like, I need your support right now. Can you help me? It's real. It's real.
Yes.
But the university doesn't care about that. They don't see that. They don't value that. Although that's part of our job, supporting students to get to the next. Let me stop.
Yeah.
But please feel free to go on your soapbox, because actually what I was actually told, and I know other people are told that, not only by administrators, but by other Black folks, don't do that work. Close your door. If you want to be successful, you can't keep doing that. You can't do the housekeeping. You can't do don't let them mammify you, right? Yeah. These are the things that I heard. Don't let, all that service work that you're doing, nobody is going to, that you can't put that on your Vita. It doesn't count. You can't put that in your tenure packet. It doesn't count. So when I talk about this, academia being an institution, an organism that is designed to protect itself, that is one of the ways, and it's one of the ways that I think sort of white supremacist culture gets recreated, is to dehumanize folks, right? So I'm supposed to turn my back on this whole human being who's standing in front of me saying, I need your help, right? When I know also very much that I've probably been in their position at some point. I've been somewhere and wish there was a safe, familiar, warm, welcoming Black space for me to be in. And I'm supposed to just close my door because the bigger goal is to get tenure. The bigger goal is to get full professor. The bigger goal is to get that grant money to justify your job so that the institution can pimp you out. But that's a whole different podcast.
And as that individual Black student, so of all the kind of different categories, and y'all, these categories are kind of arbitrary, but it helps to help the conversation flow. But of all the categories, y'all Black students are kind of the most powerful because y'all are paying money to be there. And there's this amazing thing called social media. And there's something about social media, like schools hate being embarrassed in the public square. And this is one of those few times where I think if you do it and do it well, I think you can leverage a great power. So like, the medical students that I work with, they attend a private medical school, and they're paying $60,000 a year. And they're like, hey, we want more, this, that, and other. We want more inclusive, and talks about equity and social determinants of health. And I tell them all the time, speak up. I mean, you're paying all this money and you have the power of social media. The world is your oyster. Now, on the flip side, it's also kind of not fair that they have to add now another thing that they have to do in addition to learning their craft and learning the science and all that. So I try to be cognizant of that as well. It kind of puts them in a catch-22 sometimes, but they are in the most powerful position, I think. I don't know if y'all feel the same, but.
So I always think about that there's power in numbers, right? When we talk, that's like an old adage, and you can talk about critical mass, which has been studied, and like collectivism. I think that is true across the board. We just don't get trained to think that way. I think that it's a higher likelihood that you could get students to sort of coalesce and work together at that point in their career than there is for faculty. Because let me tell you something, people like getting that check. People don't like stuff messing with their check. They really don't, and it makes people really, really scared. And I think that the stakes get higher once you're on the faculty side. They definitely are higher when you're on the administrative side. So people are less willing to like legitimately stick their necks out. And graduate students have way more flexibility in being a little bit more subversive, but definitely do it in critical mass. Definitely do it as a collective, because one, you have more bargaining power. You have more disruptive power, but also what it can do is if you really engage in sort of collectivistic thinking and organizing, it makes it so that it doesn't feel as burdensome.
I am unsure if students are the most the most powerful population. I think there's a subset of students who are the powerful population. The white students whose dads and moms donate to that school.
Touche, sir. Touche.
Those are the students, right? Because I found, and I don't know, this may be my experience. I was a scholarship kid. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't going to college unless it was on scholarship. You know, and I don't know. I kind of always felt like I should be grateful to be there. You know, and I didn't quite feel that level of power. You know, at least from my experience, I felt like, oh well. You know, you should be happy you're here because otherwise you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for, you know, these donors, you know, doing X, Y, Z, right? So I'm unsure, but your points about social media, schools, companies hate to be embarrassed. You know what I'm saying? Like you can tag, you know, any restaurant and be like, my food was messed up. They're going to be like, DM me right now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm that bad friend. Like, so there's a lot of power in that. And there's power in numbers, but it's so hard to get the right number of students together. You know, like it's
hard to get the right number of students and stick with it, right? Sticking with it is the thing.
Well, and that is a great, again, segue into the next group, which is so staff and faculty. So a lot of people, before I was in academia and like teaching in it, I would lump those together, those two groups of people together, and they are very different. So yeah, I just want to hear from y'all. So speaking quickly about as a staff member, the thing that jumps out to me is just make sure you keep perspective, right? So as Jide said earlier, this is a job. Don't let this be your whole soul and your whole being. You need to be able to walk out that door if some people start doing some really shady shit. So
shenanigans.
Yes. What else could staff people do before we talk about the faculty?
And you know, I want to point out, I think staff have a lot of power.
Really?
Check me out.
Staff,
Nothing gets done without the departmental staff person. Nothing gets done. Nothing's getting purchased. No event is being planned. No food
grades
is being ordered.
finalized.
No grades. Nothing is happening.
No admissions are happening.
The staff people is a well-oiled machine. You know, there's a lot of disruption. So I think they have like a surprising amount of power, but it's hard. It's harder for them to wield it, I think.
Because you know what? It's a very Downton Abbey sort of mentality in that the faculty.
Downton Abbey.
The faculty are the people that get all of the prestige and the shine and the notoriety and the perception of power, and staff are the ones that are like, you know, the behind the scenes folks, the folks that are like the workers, quote unquote. And so it's totally flipped. And then the other thing that I was gonna say is I totally lost my train of thought. There was something else you said, Brian.
What? Walk away.
Oh, you know, it is so difficult to walk away. Like it is very difficult once you're a faculty member. Like all of the trappings of tenure, so many different psychological sort of constructs pulling at you, right? You have invested all of this time and energy into attaining this long-term goal. There is I had a huge sort of ego shift when I left academia, when I was like, oh, I don't get to say I'm a professor anymore. Like just you being able to say I'm a professor out in the world outside of academia automatically means something, right? So there's some ego that gets attached to that. And then the other thing is like, there is a false sense of autonomy that is different as a faculty member than as a staff member, because you are crafting your own research, your own line of scholarship, and people talk about my lab and all of these things, right? And my mentees and all of this sort of stuff. And so it creates almost like this sense that you're an independent individual, but you're really, really not. And then there's competition because you have to engage in peer review publications, peer reviewed attainment of grants. And so, you're always sort of chasing a carrot, and people who are going to be inclined to even go into academia have a inherent competitive spirit. They have an inherent desire to sort of have their ideas sort of talked about and lauded and all of those things. Like I used to always say, academia is like all of the little fish from high school and college being all in one pond. So you don't went from being a little fish to now you are a big fish in the little ass pond. And it's like the politics and the mind fuckery is absurd. Yeah, Jide.
And can I add to that point? Another thing that makes it hard to leave a faculty job, right, is that so much stuff is planned so far in advance. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to plan next. I have to get my schedule for fall 2022 ready by now. You know what I'm saying? So that makes it like, oh man, well, I'm already doing this and I got this and there's so many people that you're responsible to and blah, blah, blah. But it's a job. I just want to reiterate that. This is a job. And when it's time to go, you put in your 2 weeks notice because they'll replace your wet when they need to.
Yep.
And that's exactly what I did.
Well, so Dr. Nikki, what you're talking about, so from some of our business students and faculty have heard of this term called the fallacy of sunk costs. Have y'all heard of this?
Yes.
Okay, because I had never heard of it until I was talking to this business person. They were just like, basically, you tend to follow through an endeavor that you've already invested time, energy, and effort into, right?
Don't keep making the same mistake. Don't keep making the same mistake. That's
preach.
It.
And we do that all the time, like literally all the time.
It's what gamblers do, and that's why they lose all their money, because they're like, all right, well, the next one's going to be
the exact opposite of that, right? Like developing a line of research is engaging in. Let me just keep testing this particular theory from a slightly different way over and over again until I get it out. Like academic as a whole,
and the important part about academia that I think many people don't notice or know is that aside from professors at like these large, big universities, and particularly like the business professors, the law professors, the med school professors, we're not balling like that. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe we ain't making no money.
We do. Tenure track faculty generally do okay. Like I'm not going to sit here and act like we're starving, right? Non-tenure track faculty absolutely needs to be treated better, okay? And that's no question. But we're not balling like that, and that's a misconception I think a lot of people have, is that we're like balling with money. And if you're not in the law school, med school, business school, that's not true.
It's not true. Not at all. I remember there's some really lovely homes right outside of U of H, like that are just really adjacent to the campus, like big, sprawling, lovely homes, Bayou adjacent homes. And somebody asked me one time, like, do you live near the university? And I literally like started laughing out loud, and then I realized they were serious. Like, you think I make enough money as an academic, as a Black woman? And we can also talk about the pay differential exists even in the academy among racial and gender lines. So I'm a Black woman in a social science. You think I'm making enough money to live in this 2,000 square foot home? That's like, please get out of here. Yeah. So yes. And let me also just acknowledge this other important part, because we talked about Black and the Ivory, right? You're doing all of these things are true. And Black folks in these spaces are some of the most brilliant, the most hardworking, the most innovative folks that you will encounter. Like y'all, like us, folks that have a doctorate degree, and Black folks that have a doctorate degree, you should pay them attention. You should respect them. You should pay them coins as well, right? Because we come to the work different from the beginning, because I think most of us also come to the work because we want to do something in our community or for our community. So we come with a whole different fire and passion and reason for it. And then we show up and we perform excellently because we know we have no other choice but to.
Preach.
And then I think the other special sauce that makes Black folks in this country collectively differentially intelligent, more intelligent, is we have to learn how to also navigate those social contexts. So I'm building my knowledge base, my sort of cognitive, right, knowledge base, but I'm also building my social knowledge base and learning how to navigate these systems. And so I have different interpersonal skills. I have to rely on you have to still have to have a hustler mentality when you're a Black person, regardless of the system you're in. And so that is, I think, so important to keep in mind as you think about engaging in that space, how to be compassionate with yourself, how to make sure you take care of yourself, acknowledge these hard truths so that you don't get sort of disconnected, burnt out, overwhelmed, that you don't internalize the sort of negative bullshit that gets thrown at you. Just remember, you are brilliant and you are amazing.
And preach, sister. And before we talk about the Black administrators, because there's a special message we want for them, I'm going to, for the faculty members. So when I was being super bougie, probably 6 or 7 years ago, I took tennis lessons, y'all, and it was awesome. And the guy who was teaching me tennis lessons said ABCs, always be closing, because he was also a real estate agent. That's how that rolls. And I've taken that message to mean always be looking. So anytime you're in a job, there are no rules that you can't be looking for another job. And it's actually very beneficial for you to see what else is out there. And so if you are a faculty member, always be looking, always take some time and see what else is out there. I mean, you don't have to apply, but it's nice to know that you always have options. And so when it comes to Black administrators, I know all administrators get kind of a bad rap because most of them are shitty, but there are some really good ones out there. And so what words of advice would y'all have for Black administrators?
It's, I feel like a lot of administrators are caught in between a rock and a hard place. You know what I'm saying? Because there's budgets, there's bosses who say this is okay and this is not okay, and then there's people under them, department chairs and faculty, who are like, I need this, but they're not allowed to do that. So I want to acknowledge that they're in this tough place. But at the end of the day, and this is why we talked about this earlier, I'm a little upset with our current president and all these things, is when you have the power, you got to use the power for good. Point blank, period. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? If I get fired knowing I did my job for good, I could live with that. But if I'm in this place and I'm just kind of I just got to keep my job, stick with the status quo, why do it? Do something else.
For the status and for the extra coins.
That's true. It is a lot of extra
money. I think that's why a lot of people do it, honestly. So my thing is, don't forget from which you came, sis, bruh. Don't remember at one point you were a graduate student. And there's nobody in academia, regardless of law school, B school, wherever, you went through this system yourself and you know the treachery, you know the challenge that it is. So when you get down to that place 20 years later in your career, don't act like you can't remember. Don't act like you don't know that the systems that were hard and difficult for you don't still exist, right? I personally think I actually take way more critique and a harder stance on Black administrators in academia than Black faculties, definitely than Black staff and graduate students, because I think what ends up happening is more often than not, they sort of just get co-opted by the system and they just are leveraging the institution's desires and their policies, which are typically not inclusive or compassionate in blackface. And sometimes they are used very specifically to appeal to, quote unquote, a diverse audience or to seem more palatable because it is coming from some place like that. So
yeah,
don't forget where you came from.
So I think that all Black administrators should be forced to fill out a fucking FAFSA every goddamn year for the rest of the time that they're in academia, so that they never forget how jacked up this system is. Because every year I had to do that, I felt so demeaned and unappreciated. And so fill out a FAFSA. Yeah.
Yep.
Alrighty, y'all. Well, we have enjoyed y'all hanging out on our podcast today about Black in the Ivory. As always, before we wrap up our podcast show, we talk about the last nerve. So this is the thing that's getting on our last nerve, and I think Dr. Jide has the last nerve today, y'all. So you can't see him, but he's getting ready. His pecs are out and delts and traps. I mean, he's
been working out.
Gun show. Get it.
And listen, let me just say, I'm gonna mute myself because I know what it is, and I know I will cause trouble. So I'm muting myself.
No. This last nerve is for all of us. Okay, this last nerve is for all of us. Okay, so am I ready, Dr. Brian? Okay,
you are ready, sir. Go.
News came out today, and images and video came out of the Border Patrol. Okay, the United States Border Patrol on the border of Mexico. How do I say this? Assaulting, abusing Haitian immigrants on horseback. So the Border Patrol agents are on horseback, and they're abusing and assaulting Haitian immigrants with whips. Okay, in 2021, they're using like whips to. First
of all, how rowdy are these people, detainees, being that require that level of brutality? First of all, how are you trained? You can't do crowd enforcement. Y'all don't get any skills and training in crowd control.
Where are you getting these whips?
But it requires a whip. Like, say what now? How? Sway? How? And where are you getting the whips from? Are these commissioned by our federal government? Have my taxes gone to commissioning whips? Why is that part of the uniform? I am so confused on so many levels. And I don't understand. Again, I've never seen other folks who are detained at the border. This has never come up before, my understanding. Now, I don't read the immigration section of the newspaper every day, so maybe I've missed something, but it does not escape me that people in Black bodies are the ones being abused by whips. Really?
And I want to point out, the White House has said that the apparent use of whips on Haitian migrants is horrific and not acceptable. So they have put out a comment.
But guess what? The whip has already been cracked on their back. This is all post-fact, Joe.
And their faces.
Ooh, child. Yeah, so this is why we have the break room, because we need a place where we can process all of this stuff and decompress. And so we hope that y'all will join us for all of our other podcasts. Make sure to subscribe because that's how we know what you want. And feel free to send us an email at thebreakroom@living-corporate.com. And we look forward to seeing y'all back on the next podcast. All right. Thanks, y'all.
Peace,
Bye, everybody.
y'all. Peace. Bye.